It is 7:05 in the evening. Friday, July 17th, 1981. Inside the atrium lobby of the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, more than 1,600 people have gathered for a tea dance. There is a live orchestra. There are couples on the floor. There are people crowded along the railings of the elevated walkways above, watching the dancing below, drinks in hand, laughing. It is, by every account, a perfect Friday evening. Then someone hears a sound. Not a crash, not an explosion, a crack. A single, sharp crack, described by one witness as big snap, like lightning in your backyard. And then the fourth-floor walkway drops. Not slowly, not partially. It drops completely onto the second-floor walkway directly below it. And the second-floor walkway, already straining under the weight of 40 people, drops onto the crowded lobby floor. The entire sequence takes seconds. When it is over, 114 people are dead. 216 more are injured. Rescue workers will spend the next 14 hours pulling survivors from beneath 60 tons of steel, concrete, and glass. It is the deadliest structural collapse in American history, a record it will hold for 20 years until the morning of September 11th, 2001. And it happened because of a phone call, a single phone call, a single design change, and a system that let it happen without anyone stopping to check whether it was safe. This is the story of the Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse. To understand how this happened, you need to understand what the Hyatt Regency was supposed to represent. In the 1960s and 1970s, the area surrounding the Hallmark greeting card company headquarters in Kansas City had slowly declined. What had once been a thriving commercial district had become, by most accounts, a neglected part of the city. Hallmark decided to change that. They undertook a major redevelopment project, a commercial complex called Crown Center, and at its heart, they planned a showpiece hotel. The Hyatt Regency Kansas City was designed to be exactly that. A showpiece, a statement. A 40-story tower connected to a conference center by a dramatic multi-story atrium. One of the most architecturally ambitious hotel lobbies in the country at the time. The atrium's defining feature was its walkways. 3 elevated sky bridges, spanning the second, third, and fourth floors, crossing the open space of the atrium, connecting the tower to the conference wing. Each walkway was approximately 121 feet long. Each weighed more than 63,000 pounds. They were suspended from the ceiling by steel hanger rods, hanging in the open air above the lobby. They were, visually, extraordinary. They gave the atrium a sense of movement, of life, of architectural daring. They were exactly the kind of design feature that would appear in architectural magazines and make civic leaders proud. Construction began in May 1978. The project was, by the standards of the era, fast-tracked. The late 1970s were a period of economic pressure. High inflation, high unemployment, double-digit interest rates. Builders were under pressure to win contracts and complete projects quickly. Oversight, in many cases, was reduced accordingly. The Hyatt project wasn't immune to that pressure. And there were signs, early on, that something was not right. In October 1979, during construction, before the hotel had opened, a section of the atrium roof collapsed. More than 2,700 square feet of roof caved in when a connection on the north side of the building failed. It was repaired. The project continued. No one stopped to ask whether the collapse was telling them something important about the integrity of the connections throughout the building. The Hyatt Regency Kansas City opened on July 1st, 1980. It was immediately celebrated. The atrium was its defining feature. The walkways were its crown jewel. Kansas City was proud of it. 1 year and 16 days later, 2 of those walkways would be on the lobby floor. The question of how that happened begins not with the collapse itself, but with a drawing. A single engineering drawing, and a phone call made sometime during the construction process that no one would fully account for in the years that followed. The original design for the walkways called for a specific and straightforward connection system. Long steel hanger rods would run continuously from the ceiling all the way down to the second-floor walkway, passing through the fourth-floor walkway along the way. Both walkways would be supported by the same continuous rod, connected to the ceiling at the top, and bearing the weight of both walkways along its length. It was not a perfect design. Investigators would later note that even the original specification barely met the required load capacity. But it was the approved design. It was what the engineering firm, GCE International, had specified and signed off on. During the fabrication process, the steel contractor, Haven Steel Company, raised a concern. The continuous rod design required the rods to be threaded along their entire length, so that nuts could be positioned at any point to support the walkways. This was difficult to fabricate. It was time-consuming, and the contractor proposed a simpler alternative. Instead of one long rod running from the ceiling to the second floor, use two shorter rods. The first rod would run from the ceiling to the fourth-floor walkway. A second, separate rod would then run from the fourth-floor walkway down to the second-floor walkway. Both walkways would still be suspended. The system would look essentially identical. The change was communicated by phone. What was said during that call and who approved what has never been definitively established. The engineering firm would later say the change was made without their knowledge or approval. The steel contractor would say the revised drawings were sent to GCE and returned with the engineering firm's approval stamp. The drawings existed, the stamp was on them. But who had reviewed them, and whether anyone had actually done the math, remained disputed. Because here is what the math shows. In the original design, each hanger rod connection at the fourth floor carried only the weight of the fourth floor walkway. The second floor walkway's weight was carried further down the rod at a separate connection point. In the revised design, the upper connection, the point where the first rod met the fourth floor walkway box beam, now had to carry the weight of both walkways simultaneously. The fourth floor walkway and the second floor walkway hanging below it. The design change had doubled the load on that single connection point. Not slightly increased it, doubled it. And the connection, the box beam resting on a nut and washer on a steel rod, wasn't designed to carry double the load. The National Bureau of Standards investigation would later conclude that the walkways, as built, could support only 1/3 of the load required by Kansas City's building codes. They were not safe the day they were installed. They were not safe the day the hotel opened. For an entire year, every person who stood on those walkways was standing on a structure that was already failing. No one knew, or if anyone knew, no one said so. The lead NBS investigator, Edward Frong, would later describe the corporate culture surrounding the entire Hyatt construction project with 6 words: everyone wanting to walk away from responsibility. By 7 p.m. on the evening of July 17, 1981, the atrium of the Hyatt Regency was full. The tea dances held at the hotel had become one of Kansas City's most popular Friday evening events. On this particular evening, more than 1,600 people were in the atrium, on the lobby floor, at the bar, watching from the upper levels. Approximately 40 people were standing on the second floor walkway. Another 16 to 20 were on the fourth floor walkway directly above them. The orchestra was playing. People were dancing. At 7:05 p.m., the box beam connection on the fourth floor walkway, the connection carrying double the load it was designed for, the connection that had been marginal from the moment it was installed, failed. Witnesses described hearing popping sounds first, then a loud crack. The fourth floor walkway dropped several inches, paused, then fell completely. It landed directly on the second floor walkway, which was already carrying the weight of 40 people. which was connected to the 4th floor by the same compromised rod system, which had the same insufficient load capacity. Both walkways fell to the lobby floor. A diner in the revolving restaurant on the 42nd floor said it felt like an explosion. The rescue operation that followed lasted 14 hours. It involved firefighters, emergency medical teams, and doctors from 5 Kansas City hospitals. Local companies donated hydraulic jacks, acetylene torches, compressors, and generators. Cranes were required to move the largest sections of collapsed walkway. Triage centers and temporary morgues were set up on the hotel's driveway and lawn. 114 people did not survive. 216 more were injured. Until September 11, 2001. It was the deadliest structural collapse in American history. The investigation that followed was extensive and, in its conclusions, damning. The National Bureau of Standards confirmed what the physical evidence made undeniable. The walkways had been structurally inadequate since the day they were built. The design change, whoever had authorized it, had created a connection that could not safely bear the load it was asked to carry. The walkways had only minimal capacity to resist their own weight, let alone the weight of the people standing on them. The investigation also revealed something that made the collapse harder, not easier, to accept. The 3rd floor walkway, the one that did not collapse that evening because it was offset from the other 2 and not part of the same stacked configuration, was also examined. It, too, had barely been capable of supporting the expected load. The problem was not isolated to the 2 walkways that fell. The entire system had been compromised. The engineering firm GCE International and its principals were found guilty of gross negligence, misconduct, and unprofessional conduct in the practice of engineering. They lost their engineering licenses in 4 states and their national affiliation. No criminal charges were ever filed. The hotel paid out approximately $140 million in legal claims to victims and their families. It was rebuilt, reopened in October 1981, and eventually renamed the Sheraton Kansas City at Crown Center. The single replacement walkway, installed after the disaster, is supported by columns anchored deep into the ground below, not suspended from the ceiling. The Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse changed engineering practice in the United States. It became a foundational case study in engineering ethics, taught in universities across the country as an example of what happens when responsibility is diffused, when shortcuts are not scrutinized, and when the question no one wants to ask is the one that most needs answering. The question, in this case, was simple. Does this connection carry twice the load it was designed for? Someone changed the design. Someone stamped the drawings. Someone built the walkways. Someone opened the hotel. And for an entire year, 1,600 people gathered in that atrium on Friday evenings and stood on those walkways. And none of them knew that the answer to that question was yes. 114 of them never got the chance to know. If you want to understand how today's world is shaped by the disasters of the past, subscribe to Error Code Human, a new documentary every week.